China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi has wrapped up a high-stakes two-day visit to Delhi, during which both sides agreed to reopen border trade at Lipulekh, Shipki and Nathu while addressing de-escalation along the line of actual control. He also pledged to collaborate on rare earths, fertilizers and critical infrastructure, all against a backdrop of the US tariff pressure. Now, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar is in Moscow for the 26th India-Russia Commission, deepening strategic and economic ties from enhanced trade frameworks to defense and energy cooperation, as New Delhi asserts its autonomy amidst Trump-era tariffs. So, are these sequential engagements with Beijing and Moscow India's calculated balancing act amidst Washington's rising pressure? Let's start off our conversation. Joining me on the telecast is Alexei Kuprianov. He is the head of Center of the Indo-Pacific Region, Institute of World Economy and International Relations of the Russian Academy of Sciences. Thank you for joining me. And my first question to you about this visit that is being made by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar to Moscow. He will be there up until 21st of August. What are the key takeaways that are expected from this visit?
Well, this morning we met with Mr. Jaishankar as part of a group of Russian experts specializing on various areas of foreign policy. So unfortunately, since the Chatham House rule was in effect, I cannot talk about everything, but I can say that discussion was about how India sees itself in the world, how it reacts, and how it tends to react to various challenges and threats, and what bilateral projects we can implement. I think the same themes will be in focus of Mr. Jaishankar discussion with Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Mantrov.
Right, absolutely. How do you view the state of affairs, particularly after the Alaska summit that has taken place and the meeting between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin? And of course, there was today a press conference that was held by the Russian embassy here in India, speaking about these secondary tariffs that have been imposed by the American administration on India for buying Russian oil, calling these tariffs to be unjustified and unwarranted, and Russia continuing to support India and will never impose tariffs, will continue to provide oil supplies to India even at discounted rates.
Well, we think that this tariffs is just pretext to press on India about the opening of Indian market to American, in fact, to American economy. And so in our cooperation, we think the economy is in foreground because our cooperation over the past 35 years resembled a stool with two legs, in fact, because political and cultural so were quite developed, but third leg, the economic one, was missing. And now we have found ourselves in an unexpected situation where this third leg has suddenly grown. And so now we are deeply interested in raising our economic cooperation and to the level, so we are deeply interested in increasing our cooperation with India on economic fields, but I'm afraid that even if India stops buying Russian oil, it so will not lead to stops of tariff war between India and United States, because, as I said before, in fact, from our point of view, it's just a pretext.
Right, absolutely, and looking forward to that SCO summit that is taking place later this month, it is expected that President Putin will be holding a bilateral with Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the sidelines. What can be the areas of convergence and talks that are going to be held between the two leaders? What do you expect?
I think it could be a common position between SCO countries in defense against this American pressure, because now not only Russia and not only China, but India as well is under this pressure. And so in cooperative way, we can defend ourselves more successfully.
Right. Absolutely. Stay on with me, Alexei. I'm also being joined by Scott Morgan. Scott is the head of US-based security firm Eagle Enterprises. He's joining me from Washington, D.C. Scott, let's understand from you, how are political pundits in America at this point of time, gauging the situation vis-a-vis these fast-paced developments that are taking place between India and Moscow and India and China, and particularly with India, China and Russia? Okay, you know, Scott, your audio is not as good, you know, it's not clear, we're not able to hear you properly, so I would request you to, you know, log off and maybe log in again, and we'll try to fix that in just a short while. Meanwhile, coming back to you, Alexei. Alexei, do you think at this time, with the US tariffs that have been imposed on a number of countries, including India, there is a momentum growing where Global South and BRICS leaders are wanting to come together? Perhaps the Trump tariffs have brought Global South and particularly BRICS closer together.
Yeah, I think so, because I'd like even say that it makes not Global South as whole, but especially Russia, India, and China closer to each other. It's quite unexpected, I understand, and maybe well, a bit uncomfortable for India to be on one side of this trade discussion with China, but nevertheless, it's a new reality, I think, because in this situation, so Indian economy needs new FDIs, new technologies, and so the main goal not to make this the possibility of providing these new technologies the leverage for the United States to press on India. So China could be the source of these technologies, and so the second goal, to keep its Indian independence in this situation and keep its strategic autonomy between China and the United States.
Okay, Alexei, also, you know, what are the key areas of convergence besides defense and oil that Russia and India can, you know, delve deep into and explore?
So it's not. We are deeply interested in in mending of this situation between Russia and India. So you know that we have a great problem that so we have a great surplus in our trade. It's in fact extremely unbalanced, and we have primarily due to export of our oil, and we are interested in somehow compensating the surplus, and we're counting on increase of the supply from Indian side, of course, of equipment parts, of medicines, drugs, and high-tech products. I think it could make our trade a bit more balanced.
All right, stay on with me, Alexei. Scott is back on the telecast with me. Scott, how do you view these developments that are taking place in the Indo-Pacific with regards to BRICS at this point of time wanting to come together against Trump tariffs? We also see a lot of engagement that is happening between India and China in the field of trade and economics, commercial aspects being discussed. And here you see Moscow and Delhi further forging their ties. Okay, I'm sorry, Scott, we are just not able to hear what you're saying. So obviously a poor audio connectivity over there. Ambassador Pradeep Kapoor coming to you. Thank you very much for joining me. And how do you see this churn that is taking place in this era of multipolarity? Do you think the Global South and BRICS are coming closer together? And this has happened primarily because of the unwarranted, difficult to understand tariff wars that have been unleashed by President Trump.
Thank you, Megha. A lot of things are happening on the international arena. Earlier, we saw how the West, including the US and the European allies, sort of pushed Russia away from themselves into the Chinese embrace, which was not a very sensible policy. And then they sort of, almost triggered the war with Ukraine, between Ukraine and Russia, in a manner that they thought would, deplete the strengths of Russia internally and externally and globally. So they put a lot of sanctions, they gave a lot of support to Ukraine, they gave a lot of weapons, and they compelled Russia to start the war because Russia realized that if Ukraine becomes a member of NATO, it becomes a very significant geostrategic threat for Russia's future because Ukraine has the biggest border with Russia. And after they had dismembered the USSR, they thought they'll push home the advantage and further break up Russia also into many countries. Now, that was not a very sensible calculation because what it did was the sanctions did a lot of damage to the Western countries, maybe more than it did to Russia. Secondly, it pushed Russia closer into the embrace of China. Thirdly, they have sort of, continued to use the resources of Russia either directly or indirectly through India or directly through bilateral trading. But they also gave Russia a segue to start trading in rubles directly without going through the dollar trade, the SWIFT mechanism. So what they had earlier, not allowed Saddam Hussein in Iraq, for example, to do, or Libya, Gaddafi to do, and both had, really been put to death by the US forces and scheming and planning. They could not do that to Russia because it was they who compelled Russia to trade in non-dollar currency platform. Now, similarly for India, they put a tariff of 50%. Now imagine, Megha, you have a tariff of 50%, or you have a tariff of 60%, or you have a tariff of 100% or 500%. When the other countries have tariffs of 15%, 10%, 20%, 25% is the maximum. You're already priced out of the market in those areas where the tariff is 50%. And above that, you are saying that you'll impose a penalty. Now, in maths, there is a very famous saying that infinity plus 1 is infinity. You don't add anything further. So 50% is like 500% or like 100%. So telling India that we are going to impose tariffs of 50% because you're trading in Russian oil and encouraging the Russian war machine is a falsehood because they are engaging directly in a lot of trading with Russia, all the European countries and America in the areas that they benefit from. And they have been benefiting from the oil trade via India because energy costs, electricity costs in a lot of European countries and in the USA where I live have gone up very, very significantly, but they would have gone up through the roof if India had not been supplying the oil which came from Russia, refined in India, added value, and then sold back to Europe and USA, and they were buying very happily. Now they are trying to say that we are going to impose tariffs on you because you are trading in that oil. India is responding that if you are going to impose 50% tariff and it's going to impact some segment of our export to USA, we are going to open up our other channels. We are going to talk even with China to see what trading we can do, even if we do not trust them in the long term. But in terms of economic trade, in terms of commerce, we are going to have talks and we are going to open up more and more sectors. Similarly with Russia, Foreign Minister, External Affairs Minister Jaishankar is in Russia to talk to the Russian leaders how we can expand the footprint with Russia in trade, in geopolitics, in culture, in commerce, in so many areas. So it's a intergovernmental committee meeting. Intergovernmental committee meetings are very important, where a very broad range of issues is discussed. This is one stage less than a prime ministerial visit. Prime ministerial visit is, of course, the most important visit which can take place between two countries, because then you're changing the entire dynamics of the relationship with the country from scratch to the topmost levels. The intergovernmental meeting prepares the ground for a future prime ministerial meeting also, but also goes very minutely into all the areas of, in issues between the two countries, positive, negative, how to resolve the negative issues, how to create more positive issues, how to create synergies, how to expand the basis of relations in so many different spheres. And External Affairs Minister heads that intergovernmental committee meetings. So I think it will be a very landmark position. It will be telling America and Europe that if you are going to try to threaten India by saying that, you're going to have tariffs like America saying 50% tariffs, then we are going to find alternatives so that the Indian economy does not have a major impact because of your tariffs. Because Indian economy as it is very resilient. We have a lot of domestic consumption, domestic production. So the dependence on exports is there, but not to the extent that other countries have dependence on exports. So India economy will be able to cope with this impact of the tariffs more easily with expanding our trade with other countries, including strong countries, including other neighbors, including Russia.
Right,
so that is a
absolutely.
message which we convey very, very
fair
clear.
enough, sir. Alex, coming back to you, and as Ambassador Kapoor was saying that we need to hedge our bets over here as part of Global South, as part of BRICS. How important is it to reduce the BRICS dependency on the dollar, and how practical it is going to be, and how feasible is it going to be, and are we even working together in that direction right now, or is it just talk and nothing has been concretized?
It's quite interesting idea to reduce the dependence on dollar, but so we have problem, especially in Russian-Indian problem, because of this reduced. Because it has its advantages and disadvantages, because advantages are obvious. By trading rupee ruble, we thereby untie trade from the dollar, reduce the likelihood of sanctions, and deprive the United States of leverage over us. But at the same time, due to the weak convertibility of the rupee, we risk getting a huge surplus in rupees. And we could invest it in Indian industry, but here we run into barrier because Russian entrepreneurs do not know the Indian market, just as Indian entrepreneurs do not know the Russian market. And our expertise is still lagging behind the needs of the market. So how many specialists in Russian economy are so as a whole are there in India, not to mention individual interests? I'm willing to bet that you can count them on the fingers of one hand if they exist at all. So we have to balance our advantages and disadvantages, and so to keep maybe a middle way between them.
Right, absolutely. All right, thank you, Alexei, for joining me. Thank you, Ambassador Kapoor, for being on the show with me.